We have done our sound check. All right, before we do anything, real quick, we have to sincerely apologize for last week's episode. When we did our sound check, the audio was not coming. We didn't realize from Nick's AirPods and not his microphone. So I have to say that it is utterly and completely Nick's fault, and he apologizes for that, and it'll never
Yeah,
happen again.
there's no doubt. There's no doubt that was on me. I heard it. I go, wow, what a miss that was.
Oh, bro.
Look, man, live from Scottsdale. So everybody watching, I got the Hilton, you know, picture on the wall. You know, the top thing. I don't
The
know what just
luxury
happened.
art. Luxury art.
I got some alerts here on the old computer here. So I apologize if anybody heard those. And yeah, man, it's Barrett Jackson week. Spent some time there, a lot of time there. Walked the bowels of that show, and what a fantastic. With everybody else getting such bad weather, it's not normal Scottsdale weather. We had 30, 35 mile an hour winds when we were at Barrett. But I'll tell you what, man, it's always great to be out here.
Dude, look at this. I look like George Costanza. I'm wearing the Gore-Tex puffy coat.
Hey, you gonna knock over some stuff at the bodega?
Yeah, I almost knocked something over getting this hat over at Lids, actually. I got a corduroy denim hat here, all
Hey,
right?
I see you.
I
Hey,
kind of
the top of the Canadian tuxedo over there.
that was good. Just wait till we get to some listener comments here. We're gonna roast, but also laugh with Nick and not at Nick's expense.
Oh, sure, I'm sure.
No, man. So you're in Scottsdale still. When are you coming back? When are you going back to Vegas?
I'll be back. So we're recording this on Saturday. I'm going to be leaving tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So I'll have been here since Wednesday and shot some great content. A lot of stuff about the LX 470. You know, for all of you that have followed from the Toyota Land Cruiser videos and different things like that, we have the LX 470. Bunch of stuff on that. And look, I couldn't drive back to Vegas in a fishbowl. So I had to get the windows tinted. So we shot a really in-depth video because I know a lot of people have questions about that. I mean, we went into what to choose, what you should be looking at for installers. I mean, we really went in depth. I know for some of you, maybe you know that stuff, but a lot of times you don't. And so, you know, I needed to get the windows tinted. Went to our great guys out at 48 Detailing, give them a shout out when we post it. My guy Zaya and his team just killed it. And then we went and started talking to some audio guys. I went through the R&D of a large speaker manufacturer that's based here. They gave me a ton of pointers. Then I hooked up with a guy that's refurbishing the Mark Levinson sound systems that I know so many of you who are from the Land Cruiser, Lexus days are wondering how to get a better sound. And so we're going to be shooting all kinds of incredible content, and this was kind of the start of it all.
That's really cool. I am one of those people that falls into the camp of not really understanding tint to the level that I know you probably should if you're going to be putting it on, even just one car or a fleet of cars, your wife's,
Yeah.
yours, your fun car, whatever. And you've actually educated me just on the phone, just on the side of like certain ceramic type of, because that word gets thrown around in a lot of industries, and I don't
Oh,
think it's
tons.
ever really explained well.
Yeah, so we go through. I mean, we actually put two different levels. What's called a dyed tint and a ceramic tint. And the ceramic tint was basically clear. And we talked about how that was more beneficial than buying a darker dyed film or dyed carbon film. So we go into all of that. You know, I went from windshield all the way back. I got full tint on it. So we'll go through all of that. You guys can check that out on HyperClean Store. YouTube channel in the future somewhere. It takes a while to edit that stuff together. But look, we have an incredible project here. And the more that I talk to people, the more that they talk about the necessary stuff to get out there, how some of the forums behind some of these vehicles that are becoming desirable. It isn't just, LX 470 or Toyota Land Cruiser, but you have guys with 20, 30 years experience that are dealing with these from dealerships. Like this guy that we got hooked up with, he's basically been fixing these Mark Levinson systems for since they basically got into the vehicles, right? So he can actually refurb the whole thing. He has the parts in stock. Think about that.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we went to his audio, his audio shop, and I was like, well, how long? He would have let me drop it off today, and he had the whole thing done. He's like, I have all that stuff in stock. I mean, that's how in-depth he's into these Mark Levinson systems. And so, I know a lot of people ask, hey, what's your guys' background in the car business to be talking about cars? Well, just realize something. I got here Wednesday, and by Friday evening, I'm sitting in a guy's audio shop because of the people that I'm connected to with a guy who's an expert on these sound systems in this obscure Lexus LX 470. right? And he's so involved in them, he's got the stuff in stock.
Dude,
you
that's
know,
awesome.
that
That's a
you
real
you you
craftsman
you
right there.
yeah, you and look, man, we are going to work very hard to come back down here and shoot a very, very in-depth audio discussion on these specialty sound systems. He specifically was talking about the Bose and the C8, the Bang& Olufsen systems that are in other vehicles. I think you have a Fender
Yeah.
system
Love it.
in your vehicle, and he was very poignant about. Now, this is a guy that does $30,000 custom installs for people's vehicles. He's like, there's just a lot of things people don't know, and you shouldn't be just ripping those systems out willy nilly because there's a lot of processing and different things that goes into them. And so I'm not going to do him justice talking about it here, but for everybody that wants to follow, there's where our experience. I'm basically in a speaker manufacturer at noon, and by 3 p.m. I'm at a guy's audio shop that's basically, the leading guy probably nationally on these Mark Levinson systems.
I love it. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but I want to stay in the pocket here a little bit just because a few episodes back, I remember saying, and I've always felt this way about the car that you choose, if you can afford it, obviously. Get the one that has the best audio or the closest trim, because so many manufacturers have so many
Sure.
different levels of trims that has the best audio so that you don't have to go in and do the extra stuff. It's always fun to go and put a good sub in the back or depending on the year of the car under the seat or whatever. But when you get something like, and we had even kind of talked about it, and I'm no expert by no means, right? And I'm sure you would say you're not either. But
Yeah.
when you get a good
Agreed.
audio system and a good car from factory, and it's made well, and everything was just really flushed out, there's no beating it. Like there really isn't an aftermarket, I think, that really meets especially for the car. Like a lot of those things are made specific to that car or to that
Yes.
line of cars.
Yeah, and he had a great, he says, hey, we can provide sort of a sub upgrade, with an extra amp, let's say 15 to 2,500 bucks, and that would enhance the system.
Hmm.
But when you start talking about, and he really put it in the terms I understand. For those of you listening that were around in the 90s and the 2000s, you know, you could rip the system out 2,500 bucks and you have a world-class system that was better than was in there. He goes, it's just not number one, every car from that era you don't want to do that because you can't top some of the systems like the Mark Levinson. But he's like, yeah, I can add a sub for 15 to 2,500 bucks
Hmm.
and that'll enhance the system. But ripping it all out and going custom, he goes, the people have the price wrong. And he goes, that's now somewhere between $5, $10, $15,000. And he goes, there's some of these that you can't get to sound as good even if you put 10 grand into them. And so we have to listen to guys like him because this is his life's work, right? And so there's going to be a lot of internet experts that think I'm not an expert on this stuff. Okay, I was in the show truck scene. Him and I had a laugh about that, as well as the guys at the speaker manufacturer. Had a laugh about some of our past experiences. But when you start talking to somebody he literally has like frequency and what you want to hear and why people want to hear bass and why. This guy's talking so in depth. We have to get him on camera because I think when he speaks, it's going to be like people are still going to argue him.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I was standing there like this. I'm not going to argue this guy. This guy's, he had a Rolls Royce. He had a vintage G Wagon in there. He was putting in, check this out. He was putting in an auxiliary cord because the guy wanted to play his iPod in his vintage G Wagon.
I like
Right.
that kid.
So, oh, dude. And he's doing all this custom stuff. But he actually says, he goes, the biggest arguments that I have are people that have good sound systems that tell me what they want. And I go, it's going to sound worse. And so he declines the business and they sit there and argue with him. He's like,
Wow.
look, man, I don't want to rip your system out and charge you all of this money and have this be worse. And he says people will just sit there and argue with him. And he goes, it's gotten to a level. And he really argued against, and I'll share it here for anyone. Do not buy these simple aftermarket things off Amazon. He goes, the amount of destruction, because he's all the dealerships here in Phoenix, when something goes wrong with an audio system, they want to fix it in house, but they can't. So he's brought in and he goes, dude, it's frying all kinds of electronics, these Amazon aftermarket parts. And he goes, there's no warranty. There's no company to call. He goes, I told one of these companies I had a $50,000 PO just to try to get someone on the line. They didn't even care. He's like, I'll buy $50,000 worth of your stuff. Like just to try to get someone on the phone. They wouldn't even take his call. And so it was very interesting to hear. And when you get into these types of places with guys like him, you sit there in awe because you go, this has been 30 years of his life's work. I don't have even 1 cent to add to the conversation. So I just sit there and just ask questions and listen.
You know those posts on social you'll see where it's just like a simple meme and it's like life was just better these days, and it's the old like Ken Woods where you got the dolphins, you know? Like,
Yeah, hell
those
yeah.
audio systems were arguably better because and simpler to work with and wouldn't fry your entire computer.
Yeah, and think about this. I have a 2003 that a speaker manufacturer who was ready to give me everything I wanted just to be a part of the project said, "Go to this guy. I don't really want our stuff in there because we don't think we can
Oh,
make it sound better than he can make it sound restoring the factory system."
oh, that's so
So that is how interesting it is when you have a company that wants to be involved in the project who makes speakers and subs go, "We're now looking at it. Let me give you this guy's number." We literally drive 10 miles away from them. That guy's down there. He goes, "Yeah, you can't make it sound better." He goes, "We can add a sub. You can do certain things." He goes, "But if you start ripping everything out," because that's what I was telling them we should do.
right.
Right. I wanted to put a better system in there. And across the board, they were just like, there's some ohms and some frequencies and some things you need. And they all just said, go to this guy. So we're going to do our best to put something together. I don't know when that'll be. I'm kind of okay, letting the project happen when it happens. But when we get him together, I think he's going to be really special for everybody to listen
That's
to.
really cool. That's a good way to put a bow on that and also bring it full circle because I didn't know, like Nick and I have obviously talked off of the podcast about what he planned on doing. And the first thing you do think of is like, I'm going to go and get a good amp. I'm going to get good speakers. I'm going to rip things
Yep.
out and replace it with modern stuff. And then you come to find out what you found out. You're like, oh, wait, I had this all wrong.
Oh, I mean, totally wrong. Again, he put it in the best terms that anybody could say to me. He goes, "You're thinking of those times where you take $2,500, you throw it at it, you make it sound better than factory." He goes, "I'm telling you, these are good systems. They just have to be restored. Yes, we can add an amp, or we can add an amp and a sub if you want." He goes, "But these are really good sound systems, and they're made for the vehicle, and we need to just restore it." And again, when you see that all these people that make money in that business aren't trying to make money selling you the wrong thing, I'm telling many of you out there that's very rare. I
Super.
mean, and by the way, I mean, that's only because I have 25 years in this business that I'm getting to the people that would act that way, right? That I'm sort of getting in that top 5% of people that just go, "Hey man," I mean, because here's the thing: the speaker companies, they want to be involved with stuff that I'm doing so bad. They're like, "Do you know anybody with a Jeep? Do you know anybody with this?" And I'm back looking at their cars that they have. They go, "Do you know anybody with this? We got a plug and play system on this. We design." I mean, that's how badly they want to get involved in stuff. But they still looked at me and go talk to this guy. He knows a lot more than us, which is pretty
Wow,
cool.
that's awesome. Can't wait to do some long form stuff with somebody with that kind of knowledge. Everybody, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. This is the #1 automotive culture related podcast on planet Earth. Going on episode 11, or this is episode 11. We're going on our first dozen. It's the place where you get car news, trends, market predictions, but more importantly, a good hang every Monday on YouTube, on Instagram, everywhere at Clutch Culture Pod. Nick, you were at Barrett Jackson, dude, for days. You're still there.
Yep.
All right. I saw some stuff online from other accounts. You were posting some things in the stories on the Instagram. Where do we start? Because there's been some interesting things taking place there.
I'll say this: Barrett Jackson deserves a lot of credit for how well run everything is. From parking to getting people to the show to getting you through the metal detectors, getting you checked in, it's they deserve a ton of credit, right? So we got to start there because I can tell you, as somebody that just went to SEMA in November, not as seamless. Now, obviously, you're covering a little bit more ground in SEMA. You got a lot more attendees at SEMA, so I don't want to bang on SEMA. You have a lot of construction going on at the convention center there in Vegas, which is making it tougher. But I will say this, that the first thing you notice is just how seamless and well run it is. And for those of us that are living in the year 2025, you don't really get to say that about a lot of things, right? You almost have the idea that, hey, maybe 2019 we had things figured out, a little bit more than where we are now. But I'll tell you this, it's so well run. You notice the friendliness. That's the first thing that you notice is the friendliness of the people there. Everybody there is just whatever they're into, and they want to go check it out. And there's a fascination with all of that because you don't get that a lot of places. In 2025, to me, you don't get that a lot of places. You get a lot of anger online. But I tell you what, you take yourself offline, you get into these car situations like Barrett Jackson, and you go, you know what, man? It's just a bunch of people talking about cars. And again, I had a guy, the Hummer EV was there. I was making some statements. I was shooting some content. And the guy just goes, never thought about that stuff, man. Thanks for, I mean, he was just eavesdropping, right? I wasn't talking to him. He goes, I never thought about those things. And, thank you. And you just kind of look at it and he started parroting some of the things I was saying to his buddies. And you realize that it's just a bunch of people really just shooting the shit about cars. And not everybody's there to buy. I don't know if everybody knows that. Most people there that are attending the show are not bidders. You have to get a bidder's badge to do that. But they deserve a ton of credit. So I want to start there when we talk about Barrett Jackson.
Yeah, and this actually leads me to a question I wanted to ask. It'll kind of tie into this and to stay on Barrett Jackson. But what do you think moves markets the most today?
That's a good question. I think you have some specialty dealers that are becoming bigger on social media that I think are pushing some agendas. You got the guys down in Miami, John Tamarian, I believe is his name, at We Are Curated. I think he's a guy that brings a lot of things in the exotic market, into the fold. I think you're getting influences from a couple places. Number one, you have some big collectors and some big dealers that are setting the market and setting the demand on a lot of stuff. But I also think, we have to talk about social media educating people on certain platforms, right? I mean, just think of Land Cruiser, right? Land Cruiser's been nothing but benefited out of the internet culture around Land Cruiser, right? Just something that we talk about a lot on this show because of my new LX470. I think the internet sets a lot of the culture. But I also believe, how the guys and gals with the money that are placing the bids, that are buying into collections, they're the tastemakers. I mean, and that's always been that way, right? Whatever they think is hot, whatever they bid up. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about the Corvette that kind of shocked the world last night with a very odd looking thing on the outside. But I think when we talk about it, you're going to realize it's not odd. There's collectors that search out those types of vehicles. Whether you and I or anybody listening would have paid what we paid, you got to remember, if money's no object, that man or woman doesn't care what they paid.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is set off that. Yeah, we didn't pay for it.
Paid for it.
Yeah. And I think that's what other people, you see this in the auction room for people that have never bid on them and they're sitting in the crowd. You'll hear a lot of rustling like, why didn't this go for more? Or why did that go for so much? What they don't realize is whoever has the money is going to set the price because they're going to pay what they want to pay for that vehicle. And that is so apparent if you know what you're looking at in the auction world.
So back to Barrett Jackson, right? So you gave him their flowers, as they say these days, and they did a great job, ran a great operation. Saw a lot of things come and go, from the bidding to the just what was behind velvet ropes and the whole thing. So I guess for listeners that have never been, like, where else do you want to go down the journey of what you saw or experienced at Barrett Jackson?
You need to. There's a whole outside to Barrett Jackson, outside the building, where they have all these cars under tents. And if you really are a car person, that's where you're going to have the most fun, right? You're going to see 300Zs with 11,000 miles. You're going to see all kinds. There's a Hennessy Viper I did a video on that I think only went for like 60 grand, wow. Which I couldn't believe. And I say that in the video. Those types of places, it's really the bowels of the show. It's the least crowded of the show, but it's sort of a staging area. Plus, they take them and set them there after they've gone across the block in case somebody doesn't have transpo set up. Maybe they're waiting on a title. Maybe they're waiting on funds. And so, I mean, look, we saw a Bentley Flying Spur that I think went for $24,000 that had like 40,000 miles on it. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, man, would I have taken this over my LX? Huh.
I think
I would have made it halfway here from Vegas if I'd have driven that, probably with with an O2 sensor going out. But, I kind of look at it and I say, it's fascinating. We saw a Jeep Wagoneer, somebody dropped 20,000 in cosmetics and, refreshing it. Obviously, my business partner, Marshall, has a Wagoneer that he's been working on. and you see so many things. We saw a BMW 635, which you don't see a bunch of those around. I mean, it sold for barely any money, but I look at those and I go, those are the kind of vehicles that don't get talked about at Barrett, number one. And when you go out under these tents, man, you see a lot of really cool stuff that you go. I mean, we saw a Land Cruiser that was swapped with a Cummins engine. We just saw a lot of cool stuff, man. And I think that is the interesting part. Plus, they got all the fair food and all the stuff outside. They got, a cover band out there. And then, you get into the memorabilia stuff, which is a big part of this show if people have never been.
Yeah, no, I've never been. Would you say it's one of those like you got like if you love cars, you should try to attend an event?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are shows like this, Amelia Island, Pebble Beach, Barrett, Scottsdale. These are shows to attend. Go out there for 2-3 days. You don't need to go out there for the whole week. If you're going to come to Barrett, probably do, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and get out of town. You want to experience, the Saturday stuff if you've never been here. Just because, people are off work, the crowds get bigger, the excitement gets bigger. They usually leave. A lot of the big cars go on Saturday, especially as you get towards Saturday night. And again, it's all really easy to figure out, right? People have drinking a little bit more. You have some bigger numbers on Saturday usually. But I'll say this, man, it's a show. This particular Barrett Jackson Scottsdale, it's a first class experience. It really is, and they handle crowds well. The show moves. Everything is just how it should be. Doesn't matter if you're, doesn't matter if you're into muscle cars or European cars or whatever. There is a little bit of something for everybody, but you just got to take it all in. So it's definitely worth the trip.
Do you think that anything that sells for high dollar or just sells period, but especially high dollar and rolls across that stage impacts the real life market everyday value of some of those cars?
It depends. I mean, we've kind of seen the vintage Mercedes that have now sustained some of that excitement around them, and I shared on our story a 94 E500 Sport sedan went for $125,000 when I kind of told everybody yesterday that worked in the industry at that time was around those cars. They're like, what the hell? Hey, look, man, they are built like tanks. People are coming of age now where those were maybe the cars that they wanted to own and didn't have the money. And people got to remember something. We see a lot of cars, Barrett Jackson has a ton of muscle cars. They have a ton of those, classic, hot rods and different things like that. That doesn't excite tons of people. It's an older crowd. But now you got people that are 35, 45, maybe approaching 50 years old, where that 94 E500 sedan is something they wanted to own, right? And they go, I don't care what it costs. And I'm going to own it. And I wanted to own this, and now I have the money to own it. And so a lot of things that people have to take away from this is, we saw some big numbers on some Hondas and different things that went across the line early in the week. You could have bought the factory line for what some of these people paid for these Hondas, right? But guess what? If that was a special car to you and now you have money and it's low mileage and you're building out a collection and that's what your collection is going to be based on, then guess what? You don't care the price. And so a lot of this stuff people don't think about is if somebody wants to build out a Honda sports car collection and they want all the best examples, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what the internet thinks. They go, I want to have all the lowest mile Hondas I wish I could have owned, right? All the Nissans I wish I could have owned. It doesn't name the brand. That is one thing that people just don't think about enough is those with the money set the rules in this car business. And if you got the money and you want the car, you're going to set the market.
Go back to that question that I had. Somebody actually, it's fun to have some exchanges because there's a lot of, let's be real, there's a lot of bots on the internet. And I feel like a lot of the people that talk massive shit are bots. I don't think they're real people. And if they are, they're severely mentally ill. But then there's a lot of cool people that are on Instagram, on YouTube comments, on DM, or believe it or not, Facebook Messenger. We get some of those. And starting some of these conversations with them is always cool. And I try to interact with everybody because, we still get a flood, which again, Thank you to everybody. We get a flood
Oh,
of
it's
comments and
awesome.
interaction everywhere. The Instagram page is blown up beyond what I think both of us thought it could happen in 30 days.
100%.
But that question came from somebody who didn't want to be named on the podcast, but like what moves markets kind of thing. And what they were kind of alluding to is that they find it interesting that a lot of these big channels, and I think you and I have kind of talked about this, don't necessarily talk about certain aspects of manufacturers or of the car business or of the car game in general and kind of make waves in one way or another that would benefit the consumer. Where I think, or they were saying, a podcast like this that has a fresh take could potentially do that. I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but it could
Yeah.
lead to people listening to stuff like this, especially if the consumer, like I actually wrote down their quote a little bit here. I think was something to the effect of, you know. Stakeholders want money, right? They like money, and the consumer wants a fair trade for that money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Fair take.
you have to look at it like this. Number one, a lot of people commenting on cars in the car world are just people that we're journalists somewhere, or they're just car guys that aren't in the car business,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're not going to talk about it the way people in the business talk about it, right? And that's nobody's fault. It's just that's not their perspective, right? Their perspective is I got a press car, or I drove that once upon a time, and I just want to talk about it. And I didn't, I believe there's people that actually don't like the LFA, right? The Lexus LFA doesn't speak to them. They don't like the gearbox. They think it's overvalued. Well, that hasn't done anything to the price, right? The LFA is still a beloved vehicle, and many of us, I'm probably included in this, have a belief that the LFA is probably the best sounding engine that you can get. And that doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong, or vice versa, but I'm not going to change the LFA market. So a lot of people think of commentary and they think, well, if people talked a certain way and everybody talked a certain way, that would do something to the market. You have to really step back and go, I don't have that effect. I can have that effect on people that I deal with their collections and I give them my opinion that they pay me for. But what isn't going to happen is, and this happens a lot in the collection world, if I tell somebody not to buy something, they could still buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Happens all the time. I'm like, I just don't think you're going to get your money out of that. And they go, well, I don't care. I want to own it and I'll pay whatever it takes. And that whatever it takes mindset is what takes over the car market, especially in the collector world. You get enough guys and gals buying in the collector world on something like Hammers or LFAs or F40s or F50s, name the car, okay? Any car, doesn't matter. Whatever car you're thinking of out there listening to this, if I have 10 really, really rich people that get into that market, they're going to set the market, right? I'm not going to set the market. And that's you always have to follow the people with the money that are driving these markets. But look, we saw a bunch of vehicles where they had $150,000 in receipts and restoration, and they show the book up on the auctioneer. Here's all the receipts. Here's the book on the car, and the car goes for $52,000, and the guy's $100,000 underwater. But guess what? Most of those people don't care. He wanted or she wanted to do that car the way they wanted. They enjoyed it. They were done enjoying it. They wanted to sell it. Now, if they get lucky and somebody out there wants to pay $250,000 for the car, then they made a little money. But 99 out of 100 times, what people don't understand is the money that people put into these collections, it's very rare they come out on top and profit. I think Jerry Seinfeld just had a situation where he was offered $25 million for a car and he turned it down.
Yeah.
And again, people can look at that and say whatever they want, but remember, he's got the gold, he's setting the rules.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. And again, I kind of agree with the thought that maybe if everybody started to talk a certain way on social media about certain vehicles, it would set a market, but you'd need 1,000 really influential people to all agree exactly the same, and I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, and somebody had sent one of our posts. It might have been one of the ones about making good decisions or bad decisions, and they were like, "Look, some of us don't have vices. We don't drink. We don't gamble. We might not even vacation much, but we want to pour our money into cars, and that's where our money goes. So no one's looking at this as the best investment. Just like
Sure.
you might not look like a long vacation as a great investment, but it was memorable. You had good experience, so on and so forth. And I thought that was just such a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly how to look at it.
Yeah.
People look at the last 4 years and think that's indicative of the car market, where people were buying C8 Corvettes or every Porsche on the planet and flipping it for money within a couple months. I got news for you. That's not happening in a normal market. And by the way, it's not supposed to. It's the car market is not designed that way. It's designed to get everybody excited about the next thing coming out, and the thing previous starts to go down in value, called depreciation. And, the further we get out, I mean, I never thought I'd see a Bentley Flying Spur for $24,000. I mean, when you saw those things new, you just didn't think because you don't think that way, right? Then you're walking the 10 at Barrett Jackson, you go, this guy paid what for this? You know what I mean? This is how it's supposed to operate for 99% of the car market. And so I agree with that take is, many of us in the car world, our whole vice, so to speak, is the car world.
Yeah.
And so we got to spend money on something. None of us are going to live this life where we don't spend money on anything, right?
Absolutely.
And if you choose to spend money on cars, that's what you choose to spend your money on. And by the way, when people have more money, they just spend more money on cars.
Exactly. So let's talk about this one, okay? We have this on Barrett Jackson's Instagram, and I saw this before Barrett Jackson posted it, but they said, sold, 2012 Corvette. It's a C6. It's sold for $330,000. Sir, do you have some more information on this car? Because I couldn't find any. I don't know what's going on here.
So correct me if I'm wrong, it has 65 miles on it?
I read that it's funny, they didn't put that in this post, but I did read that somewhere.
Yeah, let's just say it has under 100 miles to just satisfy everybody. And so there's a big confusion when these types of sales happen, and let's just walk it through of exactly what could have happened here. You have in the building, whether that's on the phone bidding or in the room bidding, you have people that go, hey, I want the car because I have every low mileage Corvette ever built, right? You get 2 or 3 of those people, the price is going to get to 300,000 pretty quickly. Right? It's not hard to see if you've ever been a part of an auction. It only takes, this is kind of what I was told when I was introduced to the auction world on a much lower scale at just the Ohio Auto Auction when I was 17 by a guy that bought 600 cars a week at the auto auctions. As he goes, it just takes one idiot. It just takes, and that's how we all, I mean, look, if we had money, you could be the idiot in the room, I mean, I'm not saying somebody's actually an idiot, but I think people know what that comment means, which is it just takes somebody that wants it, right? And if you have 2 people that want it, now you have a bidding war, and so what people miss about this particular Corvette, of course, none of us would pay $300,000 for that vehicle, but if you're curating a collection of ultra low mileage Corvettes, you absolutely would pay $300,000 for this because the likelihood this ever gets driven is slim and none. Okay. The mileage on that car is what we're going to call transpo miles. It's the miles getting on and off a truck and into my collection. Then maybe I move it a few miles over a 10-year period, moving it around my collection. So it's going to have transpo and collection mileage. And it doesn't make sense to a lot of us. We don't buy cars to have them sit, but you do have these massive collections, private collections, which we always see come up at Barrett Jackson or different, Pebble Beach, Sotheby's, Gooding, Mecum, doesn't matter, where somebody goes and liquidates their collection after somebody's passed away, or maybe they're just getting older and they say, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And they send their whole collection to the auction. And I think we had 2 or 3 of those at Barrett Jackson. I mean, we had a whole movie collection getting liquidated at this Barrett Jackson, which I took some photos of. They had recreations of the Dumb and Dumber vehicle. I think Ghostbuster went for $200 and some $1,000. The Ghostbuster wagon. They had the Flintstone car. They had, the car from Animal House. And so you got to realize that, while $300,000 doesn't make sense to any of us, if you're curating an ultra low mileage, it could be a Chevy collection, it could be a Corvette collection, then this is highly desirable. And if you got the money, man, like the commenter said, if this is your vice and you have endless money, then this makes sense in that vacuum.
Was that 62 Power Wagon up for sale, or was it just there being displayed? Do you know that big Mike Rowe Power Wagon that was?
Was it the Sweat Wagon?
Yes.
I think that's a charity auction. Right. I don't know if that went last night or it's going to go today. And again, some of this stuff we also need to realize that these charity auctions, and I think they're probably going to have 1 to 2 every day. And some
block at 3:30.
Okay, so you're going to have 1 to 2 of those every day, usually maybe 3 on Super Saturday at Barrett Jackson. You might have even more. Number one, it's a tax write-off. So you see those numbers. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll auction off the first Corvette that came off the line, and that'll be done for charity and those types of things. This was specifically built. Looks immaculate in person, a great. And so, don't take this number and look at this number for a Power Wagon and say that's the Power Wagon market. Yeah. That's the charity auction market. And by the way, I'm glad that they do that stuff. People get very, very, crazy about that stuff. And I just go, hey man, somebody's donated a lot of time. Somebody, everybody's winning in this. So I kind of look at the charity stuff and cheer it on and go, hey man, I just hope it all works out for everybody.
Hey dude, people get crazy about everything. People are trying to justify the 4-pot that's in the C63. So I don't know what we're even doing.
I didn't see. Did they start going off and saying that they were going to be the ones to pay $112,000 for a 4-cylinder?
Definitely are those people, and they're like, hey, they're badge whores, but they like it and they whatever. All right. I'm just saying, it's just not the smartest move.
Well, and we all have to realize something. 99.9999% chance that they've never even driven one. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
What's that?
That was one of my favorite cars when I was, a little younger, like early 20s, like a C63, like when it first kind of became a thing, was one of the coolest cars to me ever.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all kind of feel the same way. I mean, AMG meant something, just sort of like the M program meant everything at BMW. Look, man, they've hoarded them out to sell vehicles. You can't blame them. They're publicly traded companies, right? This is the thing we're trying to get across about Ferrari and the SUV. I got news for you, man. They're publicly traded. They're going to go this route. They need to sell vehicles. And again, I'm with you. I mean, there wasn't an AMG I didn't love for generations of Mercedes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a BMW M car I didn't love for generations. But we're past those generations. There's no reason to be angry about it. But again, the sales numbers and Mercedes coming out and saying we're not selling them, people aren't going to buy them. They're already recognizing people aren't going to buy them. And then you have commenters saying, well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's like when the manufacturer admits there's something wrong with it, I got news for you. It's way beyond worse than what we actually talked about.
Next week, not that we're wrapping up it yet, obviously we're only halfway through the show. We spent a lot of time talking about Barrett, which I think is great. People are going to find fun, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about next week because I want to do a dive into some of these executive orders and these EV mandates and what we can expect with this new administration and get your thoughts on it. But I do want to just ask if you know anything about Stellantis' moves. There were some people talking about some stuff in the comments, and what I had read was, they're bringing the Hemi back. They've brought back some old executives. They're getting back to, hey, we're going to just sell things that the consumer wants, right? So we don't have to go into a deep dive, but I was just curious if you knew anything about.
No, and I think the Ford CEO came out and said, hey, that we're only going to build fun cars from now on. At the end of the day, we've had an evolution in 11 episodes. That everything we were saying in episodes 1 through 4 is now exactly how these companies are going to operate. Because here's what everybody doesn't want to say: if you get a pissed off shareholder and they say we're tired of this, you're going to make the adjustment. So the first thing I think people need to recognize: if you think Stellantis, if you think Ford are making these, decisions in a vacuum in an executive board, you got shareholders that are like, you're not going to make the Ford Fusion anymore. You're going to make more Raptors. You're going to make a Mustang a great vehicle again. You're going to do that because that's what's selling and that's what the numbers say. So Stellantis, it was obvious to all of us. They could have put a Hemi in a minivan and sold a zillion of them, right? I mean, everybody knows that. They didn't do it. They should have done it. I'm not specifically saying minivans, but the Hemi was the thing that drove that brand. And when you look at it across the platforms now, they have 4 years of runway where I think this EV stuff is not going to be heavily concentrated on by the administration. And you might get the Wild West here for 4 years. But you also got to realize these big behemoth style automakers can't spin on a dime either. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if we're going to see that now. I don't know if we're going to see that at, the 4-year mark and then a new administration comes in and all of a sudden EV hits. Look, I think anybody who's being honest about it right now, the car companies have been screwed by global governments constantly flip-flopping. I don't want to make a political statement on whether EVs or gas. That's not the statement. The statement is the yo-yoing back and forth constantly has screwed over the automaking business. and I know that we're pretty hard on what we love as enthusiasts, but I want people to remember something. I think they're selling like 4,000, Z's a year. They're hardly selling any Supras. The fact these companies actually build them, we got to cheer it on. I can't believe they even built these platforms with as little as they sell. But I saw some Z numbers that I think are interesting. You go back to when Z reemerged in the early 2000s, they were selling 30, 40,000 of them a year. Now they're selling 3 to 4,000. So also the consumer speaking. But I'm glad that these platforms get built. But we also have to be very fair to these people that run these companies. Global governments have screwed up the auto manufacturing business and not let these people just go through the natural progression. Because let me tell you something. Toyota was going to build a 4-cylinder turbocharged for a Land Cruiser. They were going to do that, right? Because even if they had the big V8, they were going to recognize that we can put a lower trim model and we're going to, have 2 and 3 trim models in the US. They would have done that eventually, right? In the US, had you left them alone. This whole idea that governments have to push automakers to do everything, in some sense, that's correct. In other senses, we always saw them go from V8 to V6 to a 4-cylinder. So largely that was happening anyway. They were getting more energy efficient, so to speak, as manufacturers. The next 4 years are going to be wild because I think they're going to feel like the North American market is going to be very loose on regulation. But we also need to be realistic that if they turn that corner, they could be harmed 4 years from now if another administration doesn't follow the same thing.
We're not gonna let that happen, brother.
All right. But also, let's go ahead and, to quote Jason Camisa, let's kill that 2-cylinder with fire. Stop it. Kill it with fire in the fucking Land Cruisers. 1. 2, let's stop all the diesel particulate filters and these diesels in America here, all right? I don't want to get too crazy, too, with politics, but it's killing some of those cars, man. You spend so much money on these big diesels, and they're just not lasting.
Yeah, no, and I think this is where we need to be the voices, meaning the people in the comments and us. We need to speak about what we want, but we also need to be very, very upfront that global governments, not just the North American governments, have put a crazy burden to constantly yo-yoing. What are you going to get subsidies on? What are you aren't? I mean, just something that simple has been complete disarray for 8 to 12 years now, and I think to act like that's a simple thing to fix. For automakers, it isn't. I mean, they got to tool up, they got to tool down, they got to change. I mean, it's been unfair, and so that's our one thing is I hope Stellantis gets back to what they're good at, because actually government mandating Stellantis to move in this direction that they were never going to be good at, that hurt the consumer, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if anybody could make and should make a kind of drastic change like you were referring to a second ago, it would be Stellantis. Like, hey, we're going to pump the brakes real quick. We're just going to go back to what we were doing. Like, they are the ones that should, and maybe Nissan. It's funny enough, you said the Z. I saw some numbers too. I don't have them in front of me, but I think the Z, which I see none of, still sold better than I think maybe Supra, GR86, some of those cars.
Yeah, no, I mean, but all of us enthusiasts need to say this out loud. They're not selling any across any platform. Yeah. Not nearly to the numbers that they need. And again, I'm glad they're committed to them because I want to see those cars continue to evolve and continue to be a part of our life. But the enthusiast who seemingly tells everyone they love these cars doesn't buy them, right? And so that's where the internet comments don't make a lot of sense as you go, well, if you were buying the C63 the way it was built now, then the CEO wouldn't come out and go, we made a huge mistake, right? And it's the same with these sports cars. And again, I think you have a pricing issue, right? It's very hard, to own that third sports car now compared to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so I think all of that stuff, the economics of it and everything has just, but we need to keep it in the back of our heads that I think it could be a fun 4 years for companies like Stellantis if they get back to what they're good at. But that could all change 5 years from now with the new administration.
Yeah, and don't think you're out of the woods either, insurance companies. We haven't talked about you, but we're going to get there. Because if anything has gone up through the roof, it's insurance. It's home, car, the whole thing. But that'll be for a more in-depth conversation on another episode. But hey, have you ever heard of an account called Low Miles, No Miles?
No.
Bro. Okay. You have to go follow this. Everybody listening, free shout out here. We're giving a few shout outs here on this episode, but Low Miles, No Miles on Instagram. Let me pull this up real quick because that Corvette that sold last night or yesterday reminded me of something like this, and I want to get your thoughts because I don't know if you're a Fox body guy.
Oh yeah,
1993, 879 original miles. All right, $90,000.
yeah. That actually kind of feels low, doesn't it?
I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't know if it's a hatch or if it was a coupe. Yes, but this is a hatch. I don't know if a hatch is gonna bring that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Here's what I mean by that is that it takes one buyer,
yeah.
right? It takes one buyer.
It's
But
gonna sell.
look, that I think I'll have to go follow that account.
Look at
That's
that,
look at how clean that is.
bruh.
Yeah, no, I've always been a fan of the Fox body. That was
21,000
probably
MSRP.
that was sort of my high school time, right?
Yeah.
That was sort of like if somebody and nobody had like a new one, right? It was always something kind of beat up. But at the end of the day, those are the cars. I think people get very, very stung by what low mileage means. Like, is this an Astro van?
Yes, dude. Look at this. 55,000 miles, $7,000. One owner. Look at this thing. It's mint.
That's all it sold for?
It's selling. It's for sale. This is like you just they post vehicles for sale.
What's that line? I'll never tell anybody I won the lottery, but there'll be signs
signs?
when
Hell
I'm
yeah.
just rolling around a $7,000 Astro van that's part of this large collection of mishmash crap that nobody wants.
Dude, look, 9 miles on this Mach 1, on an '03 Mach 1.
Whoa.
This one actually doesn't
Hey,
have a
this
price.
account's off the hook. I got to follow this.
Yes. Whip out the phone. That's okay. I'll buy some time here. I thought this was so cool. There's so many things on here. Look at this 91 SHO Taurus, 8,400 miles. All right.
Wow.
Super dope. This one doesn't have they usually have a price. Oh, wait, yeah, 8,400 miles. Man, yeah, I don't know. It's very cool.
Yeah, no, and I think we kind of said it, I think it was on the last episode, is like you're seeing some of these preserved, right? And this is kind of what I'm trying to bring with my Lexus that I bought is, look, it's not low mileage, and I'm going to drive it, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with it, and I'm not going to worry about the mileage. And I drove it to Phoenix within 5 minutes of owning it, right? I'm not trying to keep it in a collection, and it's not certainly not a low mileage example. But if these cars aren't coming back, and there's not an evolution of these cars where we all think there should be, guess what, man? We got to find the low mileage ones. We got to preserve them. We got to go out there and enjoy them. Look, as many collections as I deal with, I'll say this. My firm belief is I want to see everybody drive the cars. Okay. That's just not everybody in the collection world. It's very few people in the collection world. But an Astro van with 50,000 miles in great shape, it should get you excited. I don't care if I loved an Astro van back then. I mean, you're talking, and by the way, think about this. You can buy a lot of bad vehicles for 40 grand.
Now, were you more of a Windstar guy or the
No,
Astro?
no, no. I was an Astro van guy.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
because
Windstar just had that goofy look.
it does, but I just got to show it to you because maybe this might change your mind. All right, real quick.
What about the Pontiac Dustbuster?
Ooh, not familiar with that, dude. Look, 62,000 miles, $4,900.
You can buy a lot of bad vehicles for a lot more money. Look, I put a picture on IG. Who was clamoring for the Dodge Hornet test drive facility at Barrett Jackson?
That was hilarious.
I mean, so think about this. Would you buy this or buy a Dodge Hornet? You're buying this.
I am buying this. I'm actually probably going with the Astrovan though, like you said. But I do like this. Like I do like that rounded, kind of goofy, soft look of the early 40 or mid 90s, late 90s.
Hey, man,
Ford stuff.
you can get a lot of bad cars. And by the way, I'm actually talking to somebody who works for us, has been working for me for a very long time at my house. And her son's looking for vehicles, and he's kind of a car guy. And I go, bud. And he's looking at all these new cars with new, oh, look at that Ford Ranger.
Dude, 85 Ranger, love it. 70,000 miles. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Wow. Yeah, so and I kind of told him what we're looking at here. I said, hey, you're just better off finding something older that was a very dependable vehicle with lower mileage, because people are letting some of this stuff go for very low price. So I'm in his ear to kind of train him. Maybe I'll give him that Astro van. I say, hey, look, you got a little family. Let's get you some bench seats. Let's knock it out with this $7,000 Astro. I'm not sure he's going to go for it because, it doesn't seem like he's that type of guy. But I try to tell people, and this account's the perfect example, there's a lot of these cars that we would now use the word more vintage because they're getting over 20, 25 years old. But I got to tell you, man, you can get a lot of vehicle for very low money on low mileage. Look, man, it doesn't have all the modern amenities, but I'll say this, with the busted out radio and the LX470, I rocked it old school. We had a Bluetooth speaker in there, so we could listen to some podcasts and some music. But look, man, I'm enjoying the hell out of it. And I'll tell you this, for anybody that is asking about this vehicle, this thing just chewed up the mileage. I mean, it was smooth, chill, quiet.
Go into it because Nick's literal text to me was, "I love this thing."
Yeah, I'll say this. I have a modern Lexus. Okay, so I have a large Lexus SUV that my family drives around. The kids get carted around in. I've owned a bunch of vehicles, and there's something that people, when you talk about a V8, and we're talking about the 4-cylinder now, the one thing you notice the difference of on this whole trip, and you got a lot of up and down coming out of Vegas, going over the Hoover Dam, all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't struggle. I mean, it's not a Porsche 911, right? It's not, you're not going to be setting any, time trial records here, but you want to cruise at 80. You don't feel you're going 80 miles an hour. The engine doesn't struggle. The engine doesn't whine going up a hill. It just doesn't struggle to eat the mileage. And the other thing is it's whisper quiet. It's quiet in the cab. Obviously I'm telling everybody we're bumping a little Amazon Bluetooth speaker in there. It's not like we had the best sound system in the world. But I kind of really enjoyed it because I just go, it's not buzzing at me. It's not buzzing when I change lanes. It's not doing any of that. And when you take a trip like Vegas to Phoenix, it's a relaxed trip as it is, but then you add this type of, I would say kind of like elegance of way that vehicle's built. You just go, this is what a luxury SUV is supposed to be. I'm not supposed to hear the dinging and the ringing and the buzzing and all of that kind of stuff. And when we, all of these manufacturers set up at Barrett Jackson, right? So I saw the new electric Escalade. It looks fantastic. Good design. I look at the interior and I go, oh, the buzzing and the dinging and all the stuff that would come along with that. For those of you that enjoy that, it's not what I enjoy. And I don't think most enthusiasts enjoy. Now, I know what everybody's going to say. You can turn the lane assist off. But remember, I think legally you have to go in and turn that stuff off every time.
Every time. Dude,
yeah, and I believe in Europe you got to do it twice. Right? So at the end of the day, when I look at this and I have a very honest conversation with what I want, look, man, I love that my family drives around a modern with modern safety and all that kind of stuff. Totally. When I'm talking about my vehicles, the dinging, the buzzing, the lane assist, driving to Phoenix from Las Vegas becomes less enjoyable for me.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean I want to drive the roughest ride I can get, down to Phoenix. But there is a middle ground, right? We do have late 90s, early 2000s, maybe even to 2008 or so, where you can enjoy sort of a large SUV or a bigger car or whatever, luxury vehicle, and go, I don't have all that. Now you got to bump a Bluetooth speaker when your speaker system's blown out, but you just got to be good with that.
You literally touched on something that I've been mulling over because when I'll see either interactions online or I'll have interactions online or even in real life with people that don't really get cars or the whole thing, which that's always going to be a thing. What I try to explain is that to me, whether you're going to a fun place, something you're looking forward to going, or you're going to a family function that you don't want to be at, the drive there really matters, right? So whatever you're in, to me, makes the destination that much better. So if I'm looking forward to going somewhere and I'm enjoying the drive in with the vehicle that I chose, it makes the destination that much better. If I'm going somewhere I don't want to go, the drive has to be good, or I'm going to be that much more miserable when I get there.
Oh yeah, no question, no question. Like if I know I'm going somewhere that's not going to be very fun, I take my BMW just so I can
let the demons
enjoy the 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, right? But I look at this and I'll say this, am I planning on keeping this vehicle forever? Not really. If that happens and it stays in the family, great. But you get what you pay for, right? And to pay, roughly $21,000 for this vehicle, get in it. I had the oil changed, the air filters changed, all before the road trip. I'm sure they did it, but I just like the peace of mind. I got a mechanic shop 3 or 4 doors down from my shop. He does great work. And he had the exact same reaction when I pulled up. He goes, "How did you find this?" And I'm like, "Hey, look, man, they're getting hot." He goes, and he gets in the interior. He goes, "Wow, he had the emotion, right? And you have the emotion, and all of the people listening. But I'll say this, one of the more enjoyable vehicles, I've made this drive to Phoenix the last 15 years hundreds of times. This has probably been the most enjoyable drive I had, which is, and I've driven some awesome cars. I've driven Ferraris down this path, all that kind of stuff. Nothing against those vehicles or any other ones I've driven. I think this one excited me because I go, first of all, I've owned it 5 minutes. I've done nothing to it. I just want to enjoy it. And went down and when I got here, I literally said to myself, and I sent you a text and I'm like, I just can't believe how well this handled the drive. And for all of you that go, well, you should know that that road trip that we all take solidifies what you feel about a car, in my opinion. And when I took this trip this week, I just go, and I've been driving around Phoenix. It's amazing.
How many miles have you put on?
I'm probably right at about 1,000 to 1,500, something like that, since I've gotten it.
Wow.
Driving it back and forth to the shop, driving it around Vegas, and then driving it down here. I'm probably sitting right at about 1,000. And I'll tell you this, man, I couldn't be happier. And by the way, I've made a lot of car purchases. I'm like, I don't like this thing at all.
Yeah.
So I'm very black and white with that. And this one's going to stick around. So I'm glad I got it for sure.
I can see the clip now. Best road trip vehicle ever, right? Or you won't find a better road trip vehicle.
And then people will be like, well, you never drove my blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, man. I mean, again, it's kind of whatever matters to you. I do take this drive several times a year. So this drive is an important drive for me to enjoy. I will say this, it just doesn't struggle. And we see that a lot in the comments, right? When people talk about they upgraded to the 4-cylinder and it struggles and they went back to their 8-cylinder. Everybody who's left a comment that basically says the 4-cylinder feels like it's always struggling, the 8-cylinder feels like it's never struggling, that's pretty evident on one of these road trips for sure.
All right, I got to give a listener a shout out here. We've got probably no Hardo this week. There was too many of them, and I feel like there's such a good upbeat feeling to this episode. I want to bring down somebody's nonsense, but this was hilarious, and I didn't get the user's name, but we were talking about EVs earlier and how the yo-yoing from these manufacturers and how it's unfair, but this is just really funny, and I want to mention it on the podcast. All right, there's a listener, everybody, for everyone tuning in, who has referred to Nick as the cop from episode 1. Right? In every comment, he refers to Nick as some sort of Officer Nick. And in this comment from this past week, he said, I respect the fact that Constable Nicholas was still cool with his college friend not interested in cars. That's really mature of him. I've never expected him, wait. I never expected that from someone who sounds like they drink testosterone with every meal. I guess you can't judge people's character based on initial vibes. It's also a fair take on EVs, and I kind of wish that most of America agreed to disagree in this way. So kudos to Nick. Whatever testosterone you're drinking.
Drinking testosterone. Hey, I think that's a compliment. I don't know if he's digging at me or.
No, that's a compliment.
So yeah, man, I love the funny stuff, guys. You can crack on whatever. That's why what we're here doing. Right. So I appreciate it. Yeah, he has been on the officer thing, so I appreciate that.
All right. You mentioned something to me about a week or two on a conversation that I wanted you to maybe slightly unpack. And the fact that you're at Barrett Jackson, we've talked about this low miles, no miles account. Your young friend who's, getting in a cheap car or whatever. You said if people understood the way the car market worked, they would have more fun. Can you unpack that in a short rant for somebody to understand what you meant by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with just simply understanding what dealers do, right? That's why I kind of, you see a lot of anger towards dealerships. You see a lot of anger towards the car market. If you go into a dealership and you don't buy all of their nonsense and you just buy a car, it's pretty incredible that dealers are some of the greatest distributors of product we've ever built in America and around the globe. You can go down and pick up 1,000 horsepower car right down the street from most of us, right? So you don't have to hate on dealers because guess what? I don't have to buy anything I don't want to buy. If I go in there and I say, hey, I'm willing to pay $50,000 for it, and the guy says it's $65,000, I can just leave, right? So when people go, why don't you say all this negative stuff about dealerships? I go, because I really have never been burnt by a dealership, right? I've seen people burned by dealerships, but when I explain to them, meaning like they're asking my advice, and I go, you could have walked out. You didn't have to sign a document. It's like a light bulb goes off. It's like, well, yeah. I said, if you had taken better care of your previous car, kept it mechanically in excellent condition, kept it cosmetically, interior and exterior in excellent condition, would you have gotten rid of it? And they go, no. And I go, okay, so you became the sucker at the poker table because you walked in there desperate to buy a car, so you made a lot of desperate moves. And by the way, we all make mistakes. I'm not judging people for making a mistake with a car purchase. We all got them on our resume. Something we wish we wouldn't have bought or we felt we paid too much for. And that's the other thing about understanding the car market is that, man, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You know, sometimes you pick the right car for you and sometimes you pick the wrong car. And again, I know for people that are in tough financial positions, that's a crappy thing to hear. But guess what? I've been in a crappy financial position when I needed a vehicle and I had to accept what I could afford and I had to live with it and I had to live with the headaches and I had to live with the good and the bad. But I think this really pops its head in the collector world. You know, when people see television now showing all of these auctions gives people the idea of why did somebody pay ... for this vehicle? When you step back and go, that person has the money to buy what they want and you remove emotion, that's why the car went for that. Now, some cars are special. You know, one of the things I said in a video, I shot a video leaving Barrett Jackson. There's one car that I'm very surprised is constantly selling. By the way, for all the GT2 RS lovers, it's amazing how many of those are up for sale at every auction, by the way. Tons of them for sale. The one that surprises me, I can't believe how many Ford GTs continue to be sold. I'm going to tell you why, especially the reintroduction of Ford GT, you know, blue with white stripes, you know, yellow or red, and they had a lineup of them, some of them the newer models, some of the older, and I go, these are vehicles I just didn't think people would get rid of. I just didn't think they'd get rid of them. I was completely wrong on that.
Even for the
What's
dollar
that?
amounts, even for the dollar amounts that they're being sold for, like you
I just didn't think people would get rid of them. Yeah. I honestly thought people would love them so much that they would be like, I'm going to keep them forever. You know, I just didn't think, first of all, they're great cars to drive around very, very consistently, pretty damn reliable. They're not, you know, a supercar with incredible, you know, it's not like you're getting a McLaren that's at the dealership every 5 minutes. They're pretty reliable. I actually made a video and we'll post it on some of our socials when we get to the editing. I'm still shocked how many I see for sale. I mean, they just had a whole lineup of them at Barrett. And I'm going, how are these coming up for? And by the way, they're everywhere. Every auction's like this. That is one car I've been incorrect on. I just didn't think I would see them exchange hands as often as I do. And I don't know why I felt that way. I don't know why I was so wrong on it. But also, I got to realize that my opinion didn't matter, right? People want to get rid of them. Yeah. They're going to get rid of them. You know, that's what I mean by understanding the car business is that sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. Buying your own car or whether you're assessing, who in the hell thought S2000 would go for the prices or these Honda, you know, older sports cars that aren't special in any real way to most of us. But guess what? If somebody wants to own them, they're going to own them, and they're going to pay the price they got to pay to get them in their hands, and then you got to let that go. I mean, I think Evo's having a moment. There's some low mileage Evos going for a pretty penny at some of these auctions now, even some online auctions. They got to be low mileage, obviously, and mostly original. But the Ford GT, I was completely wrong on that car. I mean, I made a video walking out of Barrett Jackson. I go, I can't believe how many of these cars get sold. I just can't believe it.
Let's not get it twisted. Evo always had its moment. It hasn't lost its moment. Just so we're clear on that, okay?
Well, I don't think you saw them going for $75,000.
That's crazy. No. So sticking on the subject, I saw this towards the end of last year, but I'm seeing a lot more of it now. You can buy, or you can start to buy, a car straight from Amazon. We're talking about Hyundais. Do you have any insight on what this? Because the first thing I thought of was, in the future, you know, actually doing away or having the dealership model done away with, going straight to consumer, kind of Tesla style, or what maybe Volkswagen starting to do, maybe with Scout, that kind of thing. You think we're going to see more buying cars online? And I don't mean, Carvana does that. I get it, but like this is different when you're talking about buying something on Amazon.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I got to see it play out a little bit. You know, I think any of us making a comment on it right now, obviously I think Scout's run into some problems in California, which is going to be, which is going to be a very big issue for them because that would be a massive market for that Scout. No matter what you think about California, huge EV adoption, huge EV infrastructure compared to most states. They're already in court over going straight to consumer because they have such a strong auto dealers association in California. And there's a lot of rules and regulations and all this stuff, through that dealer agreement. I think I say this. There's no doubt we're going to see the adoption of straight to consumer on a mass scale. We've already seen it. Rivian, Lucid, Tesla, whatever, Carvana, name the companies. I think when I say it though, I think that would hurt the consumer a lot more than people think, because I don't think a lot of us know what we want to buy. And so actually walking around a dealer lot now, I was brought into a very high level conversation with an American manufacturer for one of their sub brands where they were basically buying dealers out. People didn't meet a certain, very, very popular brand. And they basically started buying dealers out who weren't moving enough according to this new ideology they had. And so their whole ideology, which they haven't executed very well, and it is going to take a long time because they're a big company to execute it, is basically they'd have one of everything on a dealership lot. Okay, so let's say they had 10 different models. You'd walk into a showroom, there'd be 10 models of cars. You could take every model they make out for a test drive. You go back, you sit down, you spec the entire vehicle, and then they deliver it to your house. Okay? That is what I think is the model. So you see all these sprawling dealerships. One of the models that I think could happen further in the future, because you got to realize there's some managing of production that would be very difficult to do here. Porsche ran into this with their paint to sample program when they allowed paint to sample on everything, and then it only lasted like 2 weeks, and they go, yeah, we can't handle this demand. Or you'd have to wait, 9 months on your Cayenne that you need next Wednesday. So I think we all need to kind of slow down, because one of the things that happens is dealers suck up excess inventory for manufacturers. That's why you get days of supply. Okay, 60 days of supply, 32 days of supply. You can pull those reports. So when everybody thinks about we're just going to go direct to consumer, that means Toyota can't run excess production when things slow down and move the cars onto dealership lots. Their facilities are going to basically sit there idle until somebody places enough orders to fire up the assembly line. I think we're very, very far from that being the model. But look, the direct-to-consumer model works probably on certain, like Model 3, it works, right? It's a low-cost vehicle. I can pump out a ton of them. We're going to sell a ton of them. Model Y, we're going to sell a ton of. Corolla and Camry could work that way because they don't even sit on the lot, very long now. But you start thinking about F-250s, F-150s, where they have massive amount of inventory every Chevy Silverado, that kind of thing. I think we're going to see a lot of different stuff happen, but I think for everybody that believes that a switch is going to be flipped, and not really look at, there's a lot of parked inventory, right? So what that does is it lowers manufacturing costs, because I think I keep things on a consistent, production schedule. The other thing that people need to realize, and I think Scout's going to be an interesting thing with this, Volkswagen's never been in the service business. They've never been in the customer service business. They've always sold to other businesses, i.e. dealers. The dealers then handled the business to consumer aspect. So for everybody clamoring for this, first of all, if you've never experienced a Tesla when Tesla goes bad in the service way, I think you need to maybe slow down and not clamor for dealers to go away, because as bad as dealers are for some people, I can promise you Volkswagen's going to be infinitely worse, because they've never done it. They don't have the infrastructure built out to handle building massive service departments. And so I think we're a lot further away from this stuff than people think.
Hey, hot hatch boys, don't let the man disparage the name of the vag. The vag. Okay. We're going to wrap up on this, okay? Have you seen Joe Rogan's new Tesla Model S?
Oh, I did see it.
You did? Okay, cool. I'm going to bring it up. Also, while I'm bringing it up, I got to say, I don't know what Electric here is trying to say by their article, and I'll just kind of skim it here. So, Rogan's got a new custom Tesla Model S Plaid. Looks sick, right? By Unplugged Performance. So, they start by saying Rogan was not always a fan of the electric vehicles. In fact, at one point, he was one of the biggest EV misinformation spreaders. Oh, God. Do you have to
I
put that in
don't.
the first two lines of the article?
By the way, this is a guy that's interviewed Elon Musk for years now. Come on. I mean,
Jeez.
he can pick up the phone and call Elon. And by the way, I don't want this to get political, but come on, man. I mean,
Come on. Come on, Fred. Anyway, it does look sick, though. So beyond that, this looks fucking cool.
yeah, look at the seats.
Yeah, that looks sick. I just
Looks
noticed
real
like,
sick.
like a digital. Look at that. It's like you're going into the
Yeah,
movies.
that's real sick.
Very cool.
That's real sick. Yeah, look, man. I think anybody that's been in a Model S Plaid and now you look at this one, I'm glad they're being built, man.
Man,
Cool cars, fast, fun to get around in. Look, Rogan, I think he regularly says it now. I think that's his favorite car he owns. He's got a hell of a car collection, by the way.
yeah, for sure.
He's got a lot of vintage Porsches, a lot of vintage muscle. But getting around town, he's pretty honest about this. And look, that's why I say anybody leaning so far one way or so far the other way, for or against EVs, the logical thing is to say, let them exist, let capitalism play its part, and if they're supposed to be around, they'll be around. And when you have guys like Joe Rogan who can buy whatever they want, doing basically a custom Model S Plaid, hey man, all good, right? But again, like you said, got to throw in the misinformation word, got to throw in what he used to say back in the whatever. I think when capitalism plays its part, we're going to find out what EV is all about. And by the way, I'm not rooting either way. I'm saying let's just let capitalism take over and see where Tesla's proven that it works.
Yeah.
Right? They can build their company. They're one of the largest manufacturers in the world now. Who's against it? Not millions of people buying the stuff. So just let capitalism run its course, but that's a sweet Model S Plaid. I'd like to get in that thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so you brain dead dorks, relax, okay? We're here for everything. I'm actually driving an hour on the north side of Austin to maybe possibly test drive an Ioniq N, but we'll see what happens. Because
there we go.
Traffic in this fucking city is worse than Houston, which I never thought I'd say that. All right, man. What can we expect from the LX? Like, you're going to be driving it back. When you get it back to the shop, do you think you're going to start your own endeavor on it?
Yeah, we're going to start. We have some signs that people may have touched the paint with some machines improperly. So we're going to start cleaning it up. We're going to show everybody how to take a steamer and get in the cracks and crevices. We're going to start taking this thing, to the preservation world, right? We're going to try to preserve it, have some fun. I haven't decided if I'm going to have the leather repaired or show people how to truly use a system that replenishes leather. So all of that stuff is coming. And like I said, it's going to stick around for a while because I'm extremely happy with the purchase. 1,000 miles in, I'm glad that I got this. I know there's a lot of guys that have them, this Land Cruiser years or LX years, and you'll say, well, no kidding. Look, man, you never know how you're going to feel about a vehicle when you start driving it around. And I got to tell you, man, I love it. Now that I got the windows tinted, it's like
cool. Nick and I were in Houston actually, and he pointed something out I didn't even notice. The amount of people driving around with no tint in one of the hottest cities in the country.
Yep.
I was like, oh my god, they're everywhere. They're just getting sunburned as they're driving.
Remember we saw an S550. It was white. You remember we were driving down that road?
In a Range Rover.
And I'm in a rain, and I'm like, what the hell? You're not in Scotland. Like, it's weird. 1 billion degrees here. Now, the only cool thing is we were prowling around Houston in an LC 500 that didn't have front window tint, which needs to be resolved.
Because we didn't know how to turn off the fucking cooled seats. What is going on? This trackpad won't work. I can't turn it off.
Yeah, no, man. That LC 500, that's a bad car, man. People really sleep on that car. That's a car I would sign off on it any day.
I have it saved in my Car Gurus as like just to kind of monitor the price, along with actually I don't think I've ever said this. My favorite Ferrari is the FF, by the way.
Oh yeah,
you could probably guess that. I love that. There's one for sale in Houston. It's still like 190 grand or something like that.
Yeah, we need to. Did you email them and go, hey, I'll give you an offer of 32?
I will mention you on the podcast every week if you sell it to me for this
Yeah.
price.
I promise. We'll bring you tons of value.
Yeah, right. I'm going to use that card eventually. This podcast will have me at some point be able to put that. Do you know what podcast I co-host? All right, we will bring it.
Yeah. Do you know?
Do you know who I am? Do you know who my dad is? No, but we're on the internet at Clutch Culture Pod everywhere: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I mean, I guess it's still here for now. We'll see what happens with that. Which, hey,
Oh, by the way,
I figured it
did you-
out.
hey, did you know? Did you know that I can't get into TikTok?
What?
Have we talked?
No.
So I went and upgraded my phone. So for those who don't know, I had an iPhone that you could literally see
like an iPhone 9.
you could see the chip on the back of it because I busted the back.
No,
I had it for like
back either. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't like upgrade my phone. So I go and upgrade my phone before we take this trip, right? And when I upgraded was during the TikTok ban. So I'm one of those guys that can't, because it's not on the App Store, I can't get it back on my phone.
No.
100%.
Damn.
Yeah. So I haven't even been able to. Are we doing all right on there?
Yeah, so I figured it out. Should I let people in on this hack for TikTok, by the way? Because we went viral on a video, and then everything after that went like 0 and 1 view. And real quick, if this ever happens to you, you have a new account. Apparently, there is a certification verification process TikTok follows where you have to actually follow some accounts, maybe leave a comment or two as you
Interaction.
post. Interact essentially, but the following is the big thing. Like follow an account or two one day, and then let it go, and then next day follow an account or two, and then after that, dude, 6 accounts later, after following like some car channels, it views back up. That's it.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, I'm just so everybody knows, there'll be no comments from me on TikTok because I literally can't get it on my phone.
Dang, that sucks. Have to do it from your desktop. All right, man. I know you're on the road, so we'll wrap up there, and we'll just see everybody next week.
All right, guys.
Episode 12 next week.
There we go.
Peace out.